Okay. So the it's kind of going to be a little bit of requirements and process mixed together. So like a little bit of the why and the what kind of blended, if you will. So the big kind of why, I actually moved this from the end to the beginning. Projecting future work, I think, is one of the most difficult things for any PM to do. There's a lot of different estimating strategies to do it. I don't really like any of the mainstream ones. And what I've come to do, I find to be reliable and accurate and useful and mostly automated. And if I got the tools just right, I could probably sauce up just the last couple bits of it. That would really be nice. So there's also a need to, so not only say like what you think you can get done in the foreseeable future, but also like what you are getting done as time passes. So you need to like update status. So I do like a weekly, or you could call it sprintly memo to call it stakeholders, call it leadership, whoever it is you want to keep in touch. Call it the information radiator, something like that. And right now, I write it manually. I think it would be better if it was built off of comments on the issues, but I'll get into that. So for projecting future work, really, I think all you need is to be able to size that work. I like t-shirt sizing, and you need to be able to compare the average time to complete same size issues in the recent path. You don't want to pull an average from like the last year or 2 years necessarily, because teams change and team capabilities change. You remove an engineer, the team's going to get slower. As engineers learn, they might speed up. So it's kind of good to look at the last maybe 3 to 6 months. And that helps account for like staff changes, team growth, things like that. In order to do that, you need to know when you started and when you finished each task. It's not enough to say like, oh, this was going to take 4 days. Like 4 days of what exactly? When somebody says it's going to take 4 days, they almost never mean 4 calendar days. They usually mean something like 4 business days, which is like not even a real thing, because it's what it really referring to. If somebody says it takes 4 days, is something like 4 days of perfect uninterrupted development time, which is not really something that exists in any kind of real business. So it's not really useful to me, honestly, when somebody says it's going to take X days or even X hours. It's like, well, how do I factor in all the other noise? And a lot of people try to factor in the noise directly. They try to give themselves things like story points for meetings. I heard blew my mind, bro.
The very function of
Meetings.
story points is to account for the noise, but go on.
The story points, you shouldn't earn a story point for anything other than planned work, because the whole reason for them is to project later how long it's going to take you to finish planned work. So I use this example with the person who told me that they had somebody on their team giving themselves story points for meetings to, account for the story points that they weren't getting. This all comes from like, oh, well, everybody has 40 hours in a week. And so we'll try to plan you to a 40-hour capacity. And you reverse engineer from that the most fucked up process ever. And what I asked was, I was like, okay, well, let's say they had, 5 meetings that week and they gave themselves 2 story points for every meeting, because every meeting was 2 hours, and they did no development work. How much planned work worth of story points did you get done that week? Is it 10 or is it 0? Because by my book, it's 0, right? So anyway, not to get too far off topic, what you really need is when you started working on it and when you finished working on it. I don't need to know how often you stopped and started and stopped and started. I don't care if you started it in March and then set it down for 6 months and then picked it back up in like August or whatever. When did you start it? When did you finish it? And that now I'm able to do automatically in Notion. I was able to set up a Notion automation that as soon as you drag it to in progress, it sets a start date. And as soon as you drag it to done, it sets an end date. And so automatically I know when things are started and finished. And you're also able to set a target end date before you even get started, which is going to help you kind of build out a bit of like an expectation roadmap for the near future. Like, okay, here are the kind of times that I'm targeting to finish these things. And so if you drag something to in progress and you already have a target date set, let's say my target date is, end of June, right? And I drag it into in progress today. Today is June 17th. It's going to show on my timeline June 17th to June 30th. And it's going to say what engineer is working on it. And so I'm automatically building out a Gantt chart. And I'm like, oh, well, I know what engineers are doing what or plan to do what during a certain time period. And then when I actually finish the work, let's say I finish it July 15th, it's going to change that June 30th start date to a July 17th actual finish date, right? And then what I have is I started on it on June 17th and I ended July 15th or whatever I just said, which is nice. Then I have the reality of it. And if at the beginning I said, oh, this is a medium, then I know that medium took a month to finish. And if that, is a pattern over the next few months with all of my mediums, then I know mediums are probably going to take a month. So then the next time I look at something and say, this is a medium, good chance it's going to take a month, and I'm able to start letting people know and projecting things out and figuring out, engineer allocation and stuff like that. Is it perfect? No, but it's pretty close. It's pretty freaking close. So that's start dates and end dates. And again, really nice if it automatically sets the dates based on statuses.
I think
Status
getting that
changes.
data together to model it is interesting. I wonder too if you could track the original estimation and the actual, and maybe auto detect certain like component implications. Like, listen, mediums for tool B, okay, look like this. Mediums for tool C, we tend to do this, and it being 6 months is interesting. Yeah, the recency, right? Because you're going to be getting efficiencies, and it's you have this like moving average almost is a term that comes to mind. Okay, so this is perfect because I hadn't necessarily even considered it as a PM tool, but I think there's some interesting opportunity to have, a organizational throughput approach to this from the beginning. Like this actually, like maybe you could actually sell this as like a B2B tool at that point. That's
That's what I
getting
had
ahead
in
of us
mind.
though. What else you got? That was a fantastic example. The projection and the way you're currently coping was very interesting.
So then what I need is a parent child relationship. And that needs to be, I guess, a few levels deep. I can get by with like 2 levels deep where it's like you have kind of a parent and a child and that's it. Kind of, I think, ideal at least to have a parent, child, grandchild situation. And the reason I like that is that I like the parents to be the thing that, that's like the epic. That's what I'm planning with the stakeholders. And I'm kind of fleshing out like all the pieces. And some pieces are going to be in and some pieces are going to remain unfinished at the end. But I use that because I like to, just like I'm able to do in Jira and I'm able to hack in Notion, I like to organize all of the pieces, like all of the stories or bugs or tasks. I like to keep them in their own lane based on whatever big initiative they're a part of. So that parent initiative is my top level and it has a lane. And in that lane is everything that I'm doing for that. And then the next lane down is everything I'm doing for that. In Notion, it's grouping actually it's subgrouping on a Kanban board. So grouping is what the columns are, and then subgrouping is like lanes in those columns, top to bottom. So my subgrouping I do by parent in that case. And then the children are just the things that you're actually doing, which are going to be like your features, your bugs, and your tasks and stuff. And then I do think it's nice to have kind of a grandchild element because you may have a feature that the engineer then wants to go and break up into engineering tasks. And it's nice to have those kind of move across the board together and have basically on the grandchild say like who is its parent, who's the child that it's a part of. So this
We
nesting, I think, is really really helpful.
we the last time we talked about this, I think I was trying to pitch something that I would name granular, given arbitrary decomposition. But now I'm wondering if we could, and you kind of did already, analyze what useful levels look like, because I think there might be labels to these levels, even if levels might contain the same level. Like at the very top, it's got to be Y, or I guess the what, which might be asserted based on a Y, and then you got the how, you got the what and the how, right? And there can be an arbitrary number of levels, I think, in each of them, but they are indeed stacked. And so what you're demanding is the scope, and how you deliver that scope is like the engineering concern. And being able to be like, instead of being like, we nailed it, this is the correct amount of scope, you can be like, oh my God, no, this wound up being so big. I need to, you know, instead of trying to come up with new names like epic and sub epic and theme, you can just be like, this is in the Y bucket. Here's the Y tree. And then the Y tree has how roots.
That's clever. I don't know. I would say the epic and stuff like those aren't new. Those are actually pretty classic. I think that you might be trying to come up with something new. For me, I think I
I
actually I
um,
actually am really happy with epic, and then under epic you have story, task, and bug. So story is like some feature that somebody's going to get. Task is something that dev wants to do because it's going to make the system maybe better for some dev reason. Bug is something that's broken that should be fixed. And in a single epic, you could have any number of those things. And then subtask can live underneath any of those three. And it's just breaking down the how.
I do think you can make it fairly arbitrary, such that only things without children can be furthered. What are the things we can move forward? Well, let's go look at the stuff that doesn't have children. There, this one, move this forward. Oh, can't do that. Got to do this. Great, do that, child. And I don't think it's incompatible. And I'm not trying to come up with new names. I'm just trying to step all the way back to a first principle for accommodating the actual way work gets done. But I think if Epic, and I think as well, bug task story was interesting because, I really want to imbue some of the like pattern idea that we've been talking about forever, that we've been reading about forever.
Yeah,
We didn't invent this, but things that are like planned work, unplanned work, setting you up to where the words you wind up having to use to describe what you're doing sets you up for the flow that we understand to be ideal.
right, right.
Planned work, unplanned work. Calling it planned work eliminates meetings from being something you can label.
I think as far as organizing on a Kanban board, you're right about having an arbitrary number of levels. The way that I would portray it is that anything that has no parent that also is a parent. Fuck, nope, doesn't work. See, so right now, at least, I have to have some way to distinguish what it is that I want my lanes to be. So, be it either call it everything that's an epic ends up being a lane, or everything that is a top level parent ends up being a lane. One way or the other. You have to have some way to say, like, this is a lane. This is not a card that's going on the board
A
necessarily.
lane. Lane.
Yeah.
Give me an example of a lane.
Um,
You're referring to
so
swim lanes where you have categories of flow that have an end. So I mean, it is some scope you're realizing, but you're realizing it over the course of some throughput.
exactly. So, like, if we're overhauling our corporate gifting system, I have an epic for that, which is essentially a lane. Like, I have a card for it as well. That card lives at an epic level board for me. So I have this sort of epic level board that I use to talk about like what big initiatives we're going to be looking at
Strategy.
when, right? But then on on our actual practical board, our Kanban board where the team is working and practicing, I don't show those epic cards. They actually show up as a lane on that board. And so all of their children show up on that board. The children don't show up on the strategy board, they show up on the work board,
Tactical.
tactical. So just something to keep in mind. When the thing is, like, I've played around with this so much, I don't really know what I like. And I think some of it, just in this very specific context, and some of it is like because it's cope. It's like, I'm trying to work around what features are available to me. So it'd be fun to play with it a little bit, specifically, and show you kind of what I've done in areas that I have problems. But what I do know that I need is the ability, if I have a given card on the board and it has a parent, I want to know right there on the board what its parent is. So be it either the lane that it's in is labeled because that's what its parent is, or if it's a subtask of another card on the board, I want it to be clear that it's nested underneath it. right? Does that make sense?
Yes.
I don't, yeah, I don't necessarily want everything to be so jumbled like it is on Notion. I really like the way that Jira handles subtasks because it kind of nests them as a child underneath the parent task. I think that that's really well handled. I'd like to see that.
I do think a lot of the challenge is going to be the user experience. The actual interface is I think the
Yeah.
primary challenge because what I've got so far is I have effectively a very arbitrary block graph where pages are a collection of blocks. Blocks can link to pages, blocks can link to blocks, and blocks have like I think it's like 7 fields of start date, due date, type, recurring date if they are to occur at a given cadence, like a chore, take out the trash. There's a couple more, but with those combinations, you could, for example, have a page with the title of a project, and you could take a block and connect it to that project. And you could have, descriptions, great, but then you could have another block have an arbitrary child association with any other block. So like the data structure, I think can accommodate everything you've described. I think one of the biggest challenges is going to be displaying it in a coherent way. And one of the things that I think you can win over on Notion is that too wide open for what I want to do here. Like I just want it to be the fewest possible clicks in the way that I think it needs to work. It's a little clunky. I've got my own notion. The databasing thing has the data structure I need, but it's too clunky. You can't have the interface you want because it's got to accommodate every possible display.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
And
I'm
so with
with
this,
you.
the idea would be to have many, many, many views of the same data, and for the data to have a lot of interconnection and a lot of uh, reversal and filterability, so I can show you all of your to-dos, all of your parentless strategy items. Maybe there's a default, type where it is in the what or how bucket so that your, one-off how that you don't want to make an epic just so it fits in Jira is still treated in this way where I can consume it the way I want to. But go on.
Yeah. What I want is really just a combination of Jira and Notion features. Like you said, with a lot of them cut out. It's not like I wouldn't be happy if you just took every feature in Jira and made it available in Notion. I want like I want like maybe 10% of the Notion features and like 5% of the Jira features, and I'm there.
That's the sweet spot. And even things like I was even questioning to do, doing, done. What does doing even mean? What does that even mean? And what does it mean to the end of the signal you even intend to send? And so working backwards from the outcomes you want was a big part of this. I've been a big fan of backlog, next, planned, scheduled, done, where backlog is everything that you could ever hope to want. It's your pile of cope where you promise you wrote it down. Your next is your stuff you're probably going to do. Planned is stuff you have written out your plan for executing it. Scheduled is the plan will occur at this time, and then you're done.
Yeah. I'll tell you what mine are. So for statuses, because you're talking about how things get from ideas to done.
Right, right.
So for statuses, I have inbox, which is for new ideas and deferred ideas, right? So even if I'm like, yeah, we're probably not going to do this, I just stick it back in the inbox. So the inbox is a pile, very, very large pile. I rarely ever look at it, only if somebody brings something up. What I will do is I will first go search the inbox to see if it's already in there. And if it is, I'll pull it out of the inbox. And if it's not, then I'll create a new item.
Icebox, remember that?
And then I have backlog, which is my list of things I definitely want to do. And it's lazily ranked. So I kind of drag some things a little higher, drag some things a little lower. And it's mostly made up of like top level parent type items. There's not a ton of like real granularity in the backlog. Might be a little bit. If somebody's like, I want this thing and it's got da da da, but sometimes it'll be like I'll just make a ticket for the thing they brought up, and I'll just list in bullet points on that parent what kind of like the child issues are. And I'll worry about breaking it out into smaller stuff later if it becomes a higher priority or makes it to next, which I have next and discovery. I think you could get away with one or both, really. So next is like kind of the top of backlog. It's more stack ranked, and discovery is like the PM has started gathering requirements. It's kind of like late phase, early phase next, and late phase next. Like, this is up, I just want you to know what I'm thinking about doing next. Discovery is like, okay, the PM is actually digging in and breaking it down into children, and like, okay, what are the actual things that we want to get out of this? What are the features that we're looking to have at the end of this thing? And what are like the musts and what are the nice to haves? Then it goes into scoping. So scoping, the whole point of scoping is like, okay, an engineer's time is being used on this now, and we haven't yet begun work. What we're doing is probably a spike or two, and we're trying to figure out exactly when we think we can target a completion on this. So I may already have like an ideal target date, but by the time it comes out of scoping, I'm going to update the target date to be what we think it'll actually be based on the size of the issue. And after scoping, it goes to in progress. And in progress, I have basically three statuses. One is on track. That's the default status. As soon as something has a target date set, it goes into on track, and we are on track for that target date. Now, at any given time, which we have a weekly touch point on this, if any given week we get together and we get to that issue as we're walking the board, this is not just with my team, this is org wide. So everybody in the org is using a board that is looking like this. And so we get down to an issue and it's like, yeah, I don't know, we're a little behind on that. I don't know if that target date 3 weeks out is going to be good anymore. So what we do is we leave a comment on the card saying what we're going to do about the newly discovered fact that we're probably not going to get this done on time. There's speculation that we're not going to get this done on time. We switch the status from on track to concerns. It's like a yellow light. And we update the target date to what we think it's going to be. And what you can see then in our report in the end is this updated from green to yellow. Here's why. Maybe somebody was busy, maybe some other thing came up. And here's what the new target date is. So it was this, and now it's this. So you see green to yellow, this date to that date. Here's why it happened. Then the next week, when you come back around, the question is, are we on track for that new target date still? And if the answer is yes, it flips back to green. And so on the next week's status report, you see yellow to green, still on track for that new target date. And if you were to look at the history for that issue, you'd see all of the status tracking. So originally this was our plan, then this was our plan, then this was our plan. And so there's accountability throughout. There's no like, well, why did this take 6 months? It's like, go look at the issue. You'll see exactly what happened to our plan over the last 6 months.
So I love this, and something that comes to mind I'd like your perspective on. In my experience, stakeholders and leadership do not seem to engage the project management tool often. That's right?
Correct.
I wonder if, and this is another UX level question, right? I wonder if more work, in fact, most work to be done is really about getting that information radiator up.
Yeah.
Because what I'm hearing from
That's
you,
what it's all about.
so what I'm hearing from you, and I want to hear your commentary on it, being stakeholder oriented and the information radiator being the very purpose of this, not the very purpose, but a primary purpose. I'm hearing you're taking these steps, flipping it to yellow, waiting until the second check to flip it back to green was really interesting. You don't flip it to green when you change the date. You flip it to green when that date change looks to be on track
Sticking.
for some time,
Yeah.
as sticking. Both of those operations have nothing to do with how the engineers get their work done. It's about your communication with your stakeholders. Talk to me about stakeholder communication and the actual means by which the communication occurs. And if you ever see in a future someone a level above you, or not even above you, but a stakeholder referring to a tool to just see their dashboard, is it just never going to happen? Is it a fool's errand?
It'll never happen. And I'll tell you exactly. I love that you asked these questions because this is right where I was going.
Maybe an email.
The last of my in progress statuses is critical. And critical can be used for either this is devastatingly late, and so it's red. So once something is critical, it never flips back to green. Once it's critical until it's done, right? This is a red issue. Or it could just be something could get flipped to critical the day after it goes to on track. And that is just, this is critical. Don't forget about it. We're going to talk about the criticals and we're going to make sure that they're highlighted at the top of our information radiator because it's
Love
a
that.
critical item. Okay. So something that is happening right now, what we do is, and I'm going to be specific about the tools because I think it'll help you visualize. So in Notion, on each individual card, you have a comments functionality, right? And what I was saying is like every single Monday, every week, you leave a comment on every card. It's just the latest status. What's going on with this? And what it includes is the why, the what, the when, the who. Now, the earlier comments are always going to have the who and the why. The later comments can be the what and the when, because the what can shift. It can be like, well, we were going to do this. Now we've narrowed the scope to this. And the when can shift because it can be like, we're going to have it done Friday. Now we're going to have it done next Wednesday, right? So the earlier comments are like, we're doing this for this reason, and it's going to benefit us, for in all of these ways, these people specifically, and we plan to have it done at this time. This is exactly the scope that we're trying to get done. That's kind of what the comment looks like early on. And then later on, the comment is just like, yep, we're still on track for, this Wednesday. And I let so-and-so know that it's coming. It's just an update on the issue. Now, unfortunately, right now, there's two things I can't do with those comments that I would love to do with those comments. One thing I would love to do is display them at a table level, because that would allow me to basically create a view just for the stakeholders. One thing that you said I don't think is entirely accurate. You said like the stakeholders don't want to dig around in the tool. I think it's true they don't want to dig around in the tool. I don't think that we can't expect them to log into the tool, but we have to give them the plainest view. They need to get in and have to do nothing. You log in, you bookmark it. I want this to be a bookmark. You click on it. There's your report right there
It
in
should
front
be
of
at slash.
you.
It
Yes.
shouldn't even be a
Yes.
bookmark. It should be go to the website we're using and thank you for logging in.
Right. You don't have to do anything. It's just your information radiator. So one way I could accomplish that is if I could just display my comments, my most recent comment, as if it were a property. I can't do that. I've tried to use like custom properties to pull the most recent comment, and I can't do it. But if you think about it in Notion, in the table, you can display any property you want to. What I can't display is the most recent comment. Imagine if you had all of the in progress items in the most recent comment, given the process that I've described to you, you would know what is the latest on everything that's currently in progress. And that is your information radiator. That's your report. Since we don't have that, I know you might have a question, but since we don't have that, what we do is manually, every PM goes after we do this process and commented everything out, we go and basically copy our comments and write the report manually. So what we use for that is actually a Slack canvas. And in a Slack canvas, we just have a section for every initiative and bullet points that are essentially the comments for every one of the tasks within that larger initiative, right? And because I've got this disjointedness to it, what ends up happening is in our daily process and our daily routine, those comments end up being really light, like really, really like kind of half-assed, kind of, like not great grammar, just kind of talked to blah, blah. Whereas the comments in the memo are actually more thought out. I'd love to just write the thought out comment right on the card and have it make its way to the information radiator. Now, the information radiator could, like I said, if I could show a comment on a table level, I would build my own radiator in the form of a view, in the form of a database view, but it would be a locked database view. It would be the dumbest thing ever. Nobody would have to ever touch anything. You just go to it and you would see this week. It would always be filtered by this week's items.
things
So
that you're
that's the dream.
subscribed to as well. Like
Right.
your one
Sure.
stakeholder sees the things they care about maybe because you do tag
Absolutely.
stakeholders in
Yeah.
some of the context as well.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, we do tag stakeholders. There are a lot of things that I'm leaving out for properties that I think are almost just givens because they're mostly like text properties and things like that that would be easy to figure out later. But there are things like stakeholder, system, theme, different stuff that allows you to classify the issues and look at your backlog multidimensionally. But let me just wrap up the communication bit here before we get into
Please.
some of that stuff because I'm almost there. When something, so I've told you as something is in progress, kind of how we're communicating week to week and how we're pushing out like a weekly memo that is basically a culmination of these comments going on each issue. And so it should, if we were able to pipe our status changes and our comments into an information radiator, I'd be in heaven. Okay. But I don't have that now. So we do that last part manually. Once we're done with development, it goes into a review stage, right? In like Jira, you think of like a review testing stage. Now you can have like code review and testing as two separate columns. You could just have review and testing where it's like we're reviewing it, then we're testing it, then it goes to production. Once something's in production, it's moved to done. Okay. And when it's done, it stays on my board, especially my communication board, my high level board, because what that means is it's completed. We're probably announcing it to the company and putting it into this week's report. So it stays on the board. Okay. And I also see right there on the board the start date and the finish date because those are automatically set as soon as I move something to done. So when I come back the next week and I see everything in the done column, a lot of folks, because again, this is a multi-team process, a lot of folks, they move their stuff to communicated after it's gone out in the memo. This is done. I've communicated.
Communicated is an interesting
Communicated is
status.
the
I'll
final
hold on to that.
status.
I'll hold
It's
on to
the
that because
final status.
that's another topic.
Now, if I see something was moved to done a week ago, I just move it to communicated because I know it went out in last week's status report if it was moved to done. So I like that I have the dates there to see. But once it's moved to communicated, that's when it disappears from my Kanban board because it is water under the bridge at that point. We have told the company about it. We've communicated to all stakeholders. We've trained anyone that has to be trained. It only stays there in the done column for as long as development work is completed. The work is in production, but we're still telling people about it. Okay. And that again is where I would love there to be some connection between my tactical board and my strategic or communications kind of process, right? Well, really, you have strategic, which is like before anything starts, and then you have tactical, which is while you're working on it, and then you have communication, which is your information radiator and things being done. And that's it. Communicated is the last status. Like I said, it's water under the bridge. And then the last thing is just that weekly or sprintly kind of memo that's going out, which again should just be a culmination of status and date changes and the comment explaining why that status and date may have changed or stayed the same even, right? Because the comment comes in every week no matter what. You're going to touch every issue and you're going to say where we're at on it. How's it going as a PM? And you'll work with the team to get that answer. But that's it. That's like the whole process. And the things that are missing right now for me really are a smoother, not hacked way of tracking kind of parents and children on the board, having just a nice clean way to say like this is an epic, so it's not going to appear on my task, bug, and storyboard. It's going to appear on the epic strategic board.
Yeah, it's a what, not a how.
Yeah, it's not necessarily that clear, and I can do it, but the problem is like when you're grouping by parents in Jira, or sorry, in Notion, the problem, and this is actually something I skipped over, and this is the real missing feature that Jira has that Notion doesn't, is I can't rank the parents. So unfortunately, I can do it manually in a really weird way, and it doesn't respect that ranking because Notion tends to choke on a multi-level parent-child relationship. So what I do is I just sort alphabetically, which kind of sucks because what you really want is like the most important epic and all those issues to be at the top. So I'm able to do that in Jira. I'm not able to do that in Notion. I'd love to be able to do that in Notion. So basically, like what I want to be able to do is if it's an epic, okay, I can stack rank it just like I can in Jira. I can stack rank all the epics, right? And then that stack rank will be reflected on the task board, on the tactical board. So whatever epic is at the top is going to be at the top on my tactical board. That is a feature I would love to have. The other missing feature, because I think the way that I handle start and end dates with automation isn't really a hack. It's actually directly how you would do it. There's no hackiness to it. It's just a little bit artisanal, but it works really well. And it's custom, so I can really think about like contingencies, like what if I already set a target date and like you can handle it, or what if there's no target date set, how do I handle it? But what I'm also missing is the fact that our comments and our status changes and stuff like that aren't automatically making their way to some real simple, easy to read information radiator. Now, what I could do is add a field as like a property that is like most recent comment, and then I could like copy it and put it there. But it's just like, ask people to, the more steps I add to the process, the less people get it right. And then somebody new comes in, which has happened a few times. And God, dude, you learn everything about how janky your process is when somebody new comes in and you have to tell them about all the nuances and all the little things and all the like, oh, well, just FYI, it works a little funky. So you have to do that. What I did is I made it real easy to create child and parent issues because I used like custom Notion buttons. So when you click create a child issue, it pops up and like, it's real simple. It's going to show up in the right place. You click create a parent initiative. It's going to show up in the right place and have the right things checked so that it doesn't show up on the right board, or on the wrong board. Anyway, I
Interesting.
digress. Yeah. I'm doing a lot of like hacky workaround stuff in Notion to get my process as close to what I want as possible, but it's still lacking for sure.
I'm definitely thinking it's interesting. You could make maybe custom forms, I guess would be the way to refer to that, without turning it into the way the data is structured. You could make this kind of a form, we'll put it into the data structure this way, and it becomes available. I think the way I'm presenting the application now, and I mean it's very early days, is a little close to the metal, where you're kind of constructing the data as it is. But if you were able to take a step back, you'd be able to it's what's the reference? There was a criticism of design where they were like, they should not have called it the gas pedal. They should have called it the accelerator, right? Because its function is to accelerate. It's not just the composite name of the thing that it is. You can refer to its function. It's an accelerator. It accelerates. By whatever means, it doesn't matter. It's the accelerator.
Yeah. There's something I want
I
to add. So I know you kind of came into this as like, oh, like task management. And you're probably thinking about personal tasks, because you seemed a little surprised when I went whole hog into like project management. But I think this is valid in both cases. I know one of the problems I've had that I've shared with you is like I don't have a great way of like sharing tasks with my wife, which would be nice because I want her to have an easy way to tell me what chores she wants me to knock out that week, right? Just drop them on my board and I will just knock them out. And so we try to do it with like Notion, but to your point, Notion is like so feature rich that it's like, oh God, what do I fucking click again? Every like 3 weeks when she wants to drop a few chores on my plate, it's like, how do I do this again? And I'm like, man, I thought I had it set up as like a no brainer, but still takes a little bit of brain because it's Notion. And, like what I did is I took like every chore I could possibly be asked to do. There's only like 10 of them, these things like clean the bathroom, vacuum, whatever. And I made them all templates, on a Notion database. And so all she has to do is click like the drop down arrow for new and pick which chore she wants done and click it. And it'll automatically assign it to me, put it to priority for this week. And I'll just see it on my board and I'll grab it when I can and it'll go to in progress. But I want it to be much simpler for her to do, for her to just drop something, say whatever she wants done on the board. And, I want there to be a clear information radiator. Like I'd love for it to send out, a notice at the end. And honestly, you talked about information radiator, like, oh, go to this link. I mean, it might be nice just to have like a weekly email, just
email.
send out like hey, look, here is the report for the week. And it just it takes a snapshot of the state of things. It says, here are things right now. Here's everything that was completed. Here's
Yeah.
everything that's new.
You know
So
what
I'd love to get
stakeholders
that.
love? Email.
Yeah, no shit.
Freaking love email. And you know what
I
they
love it so
love
much, man.
even more than email? PowerPoint. Imagine emailing them a slide. They would love that.
Yeah, no
So
kidding.
one thing I am interested in is because of the interface that this system is, it's primarily an outliner. An outliner just being a series of blocks that can be nested in pages. That is the root of the data structure, and then the blocks can have metadata like Is it a task? Is it a resource? Is it a, whatever? And all of these things can have, user experience implications, but at root, you have a graph owned by a user. You have pages within that graph and blocks within those pages. You can have multiple graphs. And I have been thinking through the ACL because you don't want it to be wide open, of course. What you could do is make it a little open where certain associations permit the associated, if there's Joe and Mike and Joe's graph one and Mike's graph one, and then Joe's page one, and then Joe's page one block one, I could grant any level of that scope to you.